That needs to be the mantra, I think, and if people haven't got the evidence, well, quite frankly, they don't have the right to sell the wares, in my view. So what I want to talk today really about is a recasting of school improvement, really, or classroom improvement. So, which has been a large part of my life working in school improvement. You know, I was Director of Education Children's Service in Tower Hamlets for a long time, and then Chief Executive of that council. And I've always been really interested in how do we help schools get better, and how does, as a teacher, how do I become better as a teacher? What's the model? What's the theory of change that I'm thinking about? And I just want to share one with you, you know, and it's just there for it's only a hypothesis, it's a tentative at this stage. But what does it mean when you recast this question principally through a lens of evidence? I'm going to use evidence as my big driver for everything that I do if I'm making a change in my classroom. And there's a cycle here, which I'm going to go through in a moment, of 5 steps. Many of them will be very familiar to them, but I think that if you're going to be very evidence-driven, there's a couple which have a new, we need to pay a bit more attention to. So, oh, that was clever. Where am I up to? The first question is this business of how do we generate the question that we're trying to solve in our school? What is the issue? Often, at the moment, that's largely driven by data. The numbers, I need to get my percentages up. I need to get myself out from under the accountability kind of framework. I need to get into that clear blue water. I want to suggest that what should drive that is not only numbers, but what should also drive that are the values of your school and the values of you as a teacher. We mustn't lose sight of, always I'm asking the question, yes, what do I want these children to learn, but what kind of school do I want to be? What kind of learners am I trying to create? There's a values, big question here about the kind of school you're creating. So I think this generating the first question, and I'm going to suggest a question and run it through these 6 points. 104,000 children last year left primary school not reading at level 4. 1 in 6 children walked into secondary schools, probably not this school, but walked into secondary schools not reading at level 4. Now, we know that the probability, if you don't read at level 4, of going on to get 5 ACCs is incredibly low. And if you're on free school meals, it's really low. So you can see why in year 7, if you've got struggling readers, there is a massive incentive, desire from whether it's just your GCSE numbers or your basic values of what education is about to help those struggling readers improve. So I want to engage and support my struggling readers in year 7. And there are a lot of them, and they're distributed right across the system. They're not all gathered in one bit of England. They're right across the English education system. And they're disproportionately children on free school meals. So 33,000 of those children are on free school meals. So what can we do about that? That's my question, and it could be any question, but I say that question has to come very authentically from your school, from your values and your data and all the stuff you know about your children, your school, your class, whatever. But that's the one I'm going to focus on for the next few minutes. The second step in the cycle, once you've got the question, is to think about what might be a possible solution. And here, the reason that we're investing in the toolkit, the reason that we think that's a useful step is because there's been lots of research done about reading. In fact, it's one of the most researched bits of education. But it's not accessible. It's not available. For too long, it's been a kind of secret garden. It's been for those people who could bother to get the little red booklet every few months out of BERA and penetrate writing that isn't written for teachers, for teachers. Apart from that, research is fine, but it's not written for teachers, by teachers, or about the things that matter to us. But, apart from that, everything's well. It's trying to create the knowledge and put the knowledge in a way that's accessible to the people who really need it. So that's why we're trying to summarize the evidence in an accessible format. You need to go further, but you need that entry point. But you need to go wider than just, do you know what? What does the school down the road do? What do you do? What do you do in the next classroom? You've got to widen that net in order to find the knowledge, the possible solutions. You've got to seek it out. I think it is a quest at that point. Internal and external knowledge. And at this point in my little journey that I've created, it's a hypothetical one, the evidence tells me that small group tuition actually might make as much difference as one-to-one. Now in our school, we've always taken the struggling readers and they've gone off to a room somewhere with somebody and done something. We've only been able to we've only had this much capacity because we've done that, and we've got more kids than we've got room for. Do I just increase the number of people who do that, or do I find another way? Well, there's some evidence that really well-organized small group tuition can have as much effect as one-to-one, or nearly as much. So let me test that out. That's what I'm going to make my test in my particular study in my school. The next step, I'm not very good at this. The next step, and on that, by the way, that's where the toolkit kicks in. You've got your question. I think the toolkit, John Hattie's book, other work, that's where I would encourage you to turn to, as you know, to find some of this evidence. Let me go wider than just the school. That's what the toolkit's for. I'm not going to talk more about it. We can questions about it if you want later on. This is one of the differences, this step. The implementation of any idea, as you know, really, really matters. So many of you may be involved in research, have conducted research. You present it up. You had a study. You had a way of supporting children, and you present it up to the world. And then someone lifts it and says, I'm going to try that in my classroom. But they don't give it the attention. They don't implement it well. And at the school level, I think this ability to implement ideas well is something we really need to think about. Our energy, our creativity, our capacity needs to come at the point of implementing knowledge. Chris Husbands earlier said that he wasn't convinced that action research was a place to generate new knowledge. I don't know if you were in that session. I agree with Chris. But I tell you what, it's only at the school level where we really understand how you can implement knowledge. How do you make it come to life in an English classroom, in my classroom of Year 7 kids? And this is where our energy should be. How do I really understand it well? Rob Coe's phrase earlier, this is where I have to think really hard about teaching and learning. What is it? How do I recast my theories of how children learn? How do I assemble the right resources? How do I give this evidence, this intervention, this evidence, the best chance of success? All too often, we might find a bit of research, find a program, drop it in my school. Didn't work. Didn't work in my school. Don't believe it. Move on. Did we give it the best chance of success? So I think this is where we need to really spend some time, and not when we're in school trying to make these things work, make evidence come to life. This is where, on the small group tuition question is, what are the features of really good small group tuition for struggling readers? What are the features? We're just about to report on a study that's been done on reading for Year 7 children, which has a general effect of being quite positive, but not for free school meal children. How could that be possible? A subgroup didn't make the same progress as the other children. When you go deeply into it, you understand that what matters in small group tuition for reading are a number of things. What critically matters is the selection of the text. Is the text at the right pitch? And in that example, my hypothesis is the text was too easy for those children, and essentially it was a special needs program and given to all children. And in fact, if it's too easy, the kids aren't going to make progress. We all know about instructional level. The kind of reading, when you were observing closely, the prompts given by the teacher or teaching assistant to the children weren't dealing with the child's real misconceptions. They were too generic. They weren't they weren't attending to the child's reading system. So it's in the detail at the implementation level that you really need to get to. So when Chris quite rightly talked about a broker of evidence coming into your school, to bring evidence to your school, what you also need is, when you have the conversation about the application of the evidence, it's a really professional conversation that teachers can have about the learning process. It's a teaching and learning conversation, not just a kind of a business administration conversation about making it happen, organizing the desks and the tables and the rooms right. You've got to have that deeper conversation about what's really happening in teaching and learning right now, if this is going to work well. And I think in this one, you know, our evidence in the toolkit about teaching assistants is that on average teaching assistants don't make a lot of difference. Quite a lot of that is because many teaching assistants have been given things to do, but without the support and the understanding about what they're really doing. It's become a kind of transaction or a ritual rather than a real teaching and learning experience that you're trying to get hold of and understanding. So this to me is often missed out, this step. That's why I spent a bit of moment on it. So really understanding, have you thought hard about what the approach means for teaching and learning?